The 70s were a golden age for music, but not every band made it into the history books. Today, we're shining a light on 20 incredible groups from that era that slipped through the cracks, unjustly forgotten, but never truly gone. Number 20, Badfinger. What happens when talent, tragedy, and bad luck collide? Badfinger, once hailed as the next Beatles, faced a heartbreaking end. Fans still wonder what could have been if this Welsh band had stayed together. Signed in 1968, Badfinger was often compared to the Beatles thanks to their melodic hits like No Matter What and Baby Blue. Despite their initial success, the band faced a series of tragic events that led to their downfall. Singer Pete Ham's tragic passing in 1975 marked the beginning of the end, with Tom Evans and Mike Gibbons following soon after. The lone survivor, Joey Molland, has since pursued a solo career, but the legacy of Badfinger remains bittersweet. A band that perfectly blended catchy melodies with powerful guitar riffs, Badfinger was one of the early influences in the power pop genre of the 70s. Their music, guided by the mentorship of the Beatles, combined the best elements of pop and rock, setting them apart from their peers. With albums like No Dice, 1970, and Straight Up, 1971, they showcased their songwriting prowess and energetic performances. However, the financial collapse of their label, Apple Records, led to misfortune. Bad deals and legal battles took a toll, and while Wish You Were Here, 1974, proved they still had greatness left, the band's tragic end is a tale of what could have been. Number 19, The Runaways. What if one of the most influential all-female rock bands was torn apart before they reached their full potential? The Runaways, a force in the hard rock scene, lit up the stage but burned out far too soon. Formed in 1975, this Los Angeles-based group led by Joan Jett and Lita Ford broke barriers and gave us anthems like Cherry Bomb. But internal tensions and disagreements led to their breakup in 1979, leaving a void in the growing community of female rockers. The Runaways released 4 studio albums and a live album during their short run, with songs like Cherry Bomb, Hollywood, and Queens of Noise becoming cult classics. Their rebellious image and powerful sound made them sensations overseas, especially in Japan. However, creative differences split the group. Jett wanted to steer the band towards punk and glam rock, while Ford and others leaned toward hard rock and heavy metal. Unable to reconcile these differences, the Runaways performed their final concert on New Year's Eve 1978 at the Cow Palace and officially disbanded in April 1979. Number 18, Joy Division.
Nothing was wrong. I took these days, we remained all alone. Staying in the same place, just staying out the time.
How does a band rise to legendary status after it's already too late? Joy Division's dark, haunting sound defined post-punk. Yet, tragedy struck before they could fully realize their potential. Formed in 1976, Joy Division quickly gained attention for their raw, emotional music. But their trajectory was cut short when frontman Ian Curtis took his own life on the eve of their first American tour in 1980. The remaining members reformed as New Order, but Joy Division's influence remains unmatched. Their debut album, Unknown Pleasures, 1979, was an instant classic, blending brooding lyrics with stark, minimalistic soundscapes. After Curtis's death, the band honored their agreement to disband if any member left, but ironically, their fame soared posthumously. Tracks like Love Will Tear Us Apart and the album Closer, 1980, cemented Joy Division's place as one of the most influential bands of their era. Number 17, Fleetwood Mac. Before the classic lineup that brought us Rumors, Fleetwood Mac's early days were marred by constant turmoil and missed opportunities. Fleetwood Mac, before their most famous lineup, initially disbanded in the late 70s after several changes in personnel and personal conflicts. Their early breakup led to a later reformation that would bring about some of their greatest successes. However, their initial spirit marked a lost era of music. Fleetwood Mac evolved into one of the greatest and most influential rock bands in the 70s and continues to carry on their legacy today. Beginning in 1967, the band attained its reputation for 36 years. Within those years came multiple scandals and rumors that amplified the band's quality of music and grew its fan base. Throughout the 20 years after its debut, the band grew in members and styles of music. The well-known and last variation of the band includes Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, and the late Christine McVie. With these members, the band quickly rose to greater fame than the original formation in 1975 with the release of their hit self-titled album. One of the notorious albums the band recorded, Rumors, released in 1977 amidst band drama, enchanted the media and earned the band additional fans. While recording this album, Nicks and Buckingham split after their long-term relationship, and the McVies, who both participated in the band during this time, divorced. While Mick Fleetwood finalized his own divorce, he and Nicks engaged in an affair that soon became public. Number 16, King Crimson.
Politicians, innocence wait with knock on fire.
What happens when creativity clashes within a band known for pushing musical boundaries? King Crimson's innovative sound was ahead of its time, but internal strife ended their journey too soon. King Crimson, a pioneer of progressive rock, disbanded in 1974 after numerous lineup changes and musical directions. Their innovative music influenced many, but internal conflicts and creative differences halted their journey. The breakup left a legacy of pioneering music that continues to inspire. Their debut album, In the Court of the Crimson King, 1969, remains their most commercially successful and influential release, with a potent mixture of jazz, classical, and experimental music. Following the sudden, simultaneous departures of McDonald and Giles, with Lake leaving very shortly afterward, the next two albums, In the Wake of Poseidon and Lizard, both 1970, were recorded during a period of instability in the band's lineup. King Crimson disbanded at the end of 1974. Number 15, Budgie. How did one of the most influential bands in British rock fly under the radar? Budgie might not be a household name, but their impact on heavy metal is undeniable. Another Welsh band, Budgie is often brought up in conversations about the new wave of British rock and heavy metal in the 1970s. They delivered 7 stellar albums in the 1970s, making them one of the most underrated rock bands of the era that have since disbanded. They kept rockin' until 2010, when Burke Shelley had to be hospitalized for an aortic aneurysm. The band, a classic power trio with the occasional keyboard player, released 10 albums with MCA, A&M, and RCA between 1971 and 1982, attracting a fair number of fans and achieving modest commercial success. Number 14, Big Star.
I can get tickets for the dance.
What happens when critical acclaim doesn't translate into commercial success? Big Star may have been overlooked in their time, but their influence is monumental today. Big Star, led by Alex Chilton, was a seminal power pop band whose influence far exceeded their commercial success. Despite critical acclaim for albums like Number One Record, the band struggled with distribution issues and disbanded in the mid-70s. Their music, however, continues to inspire a vast array of musicians across genres.
Rock and roll is here to stay.
If the short-lived but fondly remembered Big Star could have experienced popular success in direct proportion to its posthumous influence, the rangy Memphis rock quartet would have lived up to its ambitious name and then some. With the possible exception of the Velvet Underground, which enjoyed considerably more notoriety in its heyday, no other underground pop band has left such a lasting and indelible legacy. Although its original 4 members recorded only one album, Number One Record, and the group was dissolving rapidly when the second, Radio City, was completed, those records have influenced countless 80s and 90s rockers on both sides of the Atlantic, from the Replacements and R.E.M. to England's Primal Scream and Scotland's Teenage Fan Club. Although they had been packaged on a British import CD, this current reissue is the first time since their initial release that these albums have been available together in their entirety, including the previously deleted tracks In the Street and ST-110/6. Number 13, Wild Cherry. How did a band from Ohio create one of the funkiest anthems of the 70s only to disappear soon after? Wild Cherry may have been a one-hit wonder, but what a hit it was. No one knows how such fair-haired boys from Ohio steel country got their soul, but the joke wasn't lost on the band or its new international audience when the release of Play That Funky Music took the American rock and R&B top spots and went platinum in 1976. Rob Parisi, lead vocals and guitar, was raised in the steel mill town of Mingo Junction, Ohio. He graduated from Mingo High School in 1968 and formed the band Wild Cherry in 1970 in Steubenville, Ohio. The band's name, Wild Cherry, was taken from a box of cough drops. The band broke up in late 1979. Number 12, The Carpenters. What happens when a duo with unmatched vocal harmony faces a heartbreaking end? The Carpenters' soft pop sound defined an era, but tragedy cut their journey short. The Carpenters, with their melodic pop and Karen Carpenter's distinctive voice, were a staple of the 70s music scene. Karen's struggle with health issues led to the band's cessation following her death in 1983. The band's premature end due to her tragic passing left fans mourning both her and the music that could have been. The Carpenters were brother and sister Richard Carpenter and Karen Carpenter. Both grew up in Downey, California, and were very musical at an early age. Richard Carpenter started his own instrumental band with his sister Karen called the Richard Carpenter Trio. Richard played the piano and organized the music, and Karen played the drums. The Richard Carpenter Trio won a 1966 Battle of the Bands contest. In 1969, the Carpenters made their first album called Offerings. It was a flop, and so was their first single, Ticket to Ride, which was a ballad version of the Beatles song.
Don't you remember you told me you loved me, baby?
In 1970, the Carpenters made their second album called Close to You. The album was a hit, and the two singles, Close to You and We've Only Just Begun, made the Carpenters superstars. This earned them 2 Grammy Awards and made them millionaires. The Carpenters were ridiculed because they didn't fit into the rock and roll drug scene during the early 70s. They were considered goody two-shoes and square by most, but their music was very much loved by people of all ages. Number 11, The Guess Who. How did a band that helped put Canadian rock on the map suddenly fade away? The Guess Who may not be as celebrated as their peers, but their impact was undeniable. The Guess Who brought Canadian rock to the international stage with hits like American Woman. Frequent lineup changes and tensions within the band led to their breakup in the mid-70s.
I cried and these eyes have seen a lot of love, but they're never gonna see another one like I have.
Their split marked the end of a significant chapter in rock history. The Guess Who forged an identity as a distinctly Canadian band, with a diverse sound that included different variations of rock, pop, psychedelia, and even jazz, and lyrics that often contained explicit Canadian references. As Canada's Walk of Fame noted upon the band's induction in 2001, the Guess Who were the guys who made it okay to be Canadian, who proved that you didn't have to leave our shores to score big, and they've influenced just about every Canadian performer who has followed since. In July 2013, Canada Post issued a stamp in the band's honor. Number 10, Montrose. What happens when a band packed with talent just can't sustain the momentum? Montrose had all the ingredients for rock greatness, but their time was fleeting. Sammy Hagar was featured on the first 2 albums from Montrose in 1973 and 1974, respectively. The band was also composed of incredibly underrated musicians, namely Ronnie Montrose and Alan Fitzgerald. Rock Candy and Bad Motor Scooter are essential listening. Rounding out the original foursome were bassist Bill Church and drummer Denny Carmassi. The band experienced moderate success before disbanding in early 1977. The 1973 debut album Montrose eventually proved to be an international sleeper hit, selling in excess of 1 million copies and attaining platinum status in 1986. Number 9, Television. What happens when a band reshapes the punk scene but can't hold it together long enough to see their potential fulfilled? Television's brilliance left a lasting impression despite their brief existence. Television was a central part of New York's punk scene. known for their intricate guitar work and poetic lyrics. Their landmark album Marquee Moon is often cited as one of the greatest rock albums ever, but personality clashes led to their breakup soon after their second album. The band's dissolution left many wondering what might have been. Television, an American rock group, played a prominent role in the emergence of the punk new wave movement. With Television's first single, Little Johnny Jewel, 1975, and much-touted debut album Marquee Moon, 1977, the extended guitar solo found a place in a movement that generally rebelled against intricate musicianship. Guitarist Verlaine, who took his name from the French symbolist poet Paul Verlaine, and bassist Hell, former boarding school roommates, formed the Neon Boys with drummer Ficca in New York City in the early 1970s. In 1973, guitarist Lloyd joined them. As Television, they helped establish CBGB Omfug, a club in New York City's Bowery, as the epicenter of a burgeoning punk scene. Principal songwriter Verlaine delivered his surreal lyrics with an elasticity that stretched from somber declarations to unearthly squeals. But what set Television apart from other punk new wave groups was the improvisational interplay of Verlaine and Lloyd's guitars, which borrowed from avant-garde jazz and psychedelic rock. Patti Smith, with whom Verlaine wrote poetry and on whose debut single he played, described his guitar playing as the sound of 1,000 bluebirds screaming. Released in 1977, Marquee Moon caused a stir among American critics, but like its more polished follow-up Adventure, 1978, sold much better in Britain. Prior to Marquee Moon, Hell left to form the Heartbreakers with ex-New York Doll Johnny Thunders, then fronted the Voidoids. Television disbanded in 1978, reuniting briefly in 1992 for an eponymous album and tour. Number 8. Lynyrd Skynyrd. What happens when a band at the height of its success faces a sudden and tragic disaster? Lynyrd Skynyrd's legacy is forever marked by what might have been. Lynyrd Skynyrd defined Southern rock with their guitar-heavy music and rebel spirit. Their career was tragically cut short by a plane crash in 1977, which killed several members, including lead vocalist Ronnie Van Zant. The band's abrupt end halted the progress of a promising musical legacy. Lynyrd Skynyrd, an American rock band, rose to prominence during the Southern rock boom of the 1970s on the strength of its triple guitar attack and gritty working-class attitude. Sweet Home Alabama, a response to Canadian singer-songwriter Neil Young's derisive Southern Man, opens the band's sophomore effort, Second Helping, 1974. Young's song is an attack on the American South's racism, with lyrics describing slavery and lynching and calling out white Christian hypocrisy. Van Zant, Rosington, and King wrote Sweet Home Alabama as a direct retort, objecting to what they deemed to be Young's condescension and use of Southern stereotypes. Number 7. M. How does one song define an entire era while its creators fade into obscurity? M's pop music was a massive hit that introduced a new sound, but their fame didn't last. A great 80s sonic precursor, M introduced its signature sound to the world with pop music, a catchy, synth-heavy single that went number 1 in the final weeks of the 1970s, helping to usher in a new wave of music for a new decade. M is an English new wave and synth-pop music project from London led by Robin Scott. Musicians who contributed to M at one time or another included Wally Badarou, Mark King, Phil Gould, and Gary Barnacle of Level 42. M had 3 other singles that achieved a chart entry in the UK: Moonlight and Muzak, number 33 in December 1979, That's the Way the Money Goes, number 45 in March 1980, and Official Secrets, number 64, in November 1980. M released 3 studio albums throughout their career: New York, London, Paris, Munich in 1979, The Official Secrets Act in 1980, and Famous Last Words, mostly recorded in 1982 but wasn't released in the UK until 2000. A 4th album, Robin Scott with Shakisha, was recorded in 1984 but wasn't released until 1998. Number 6. The Sweet. What happens when a band masters the art of glam rock but struggles to shed their pop image? The Sweet gave us unforgettable hits, yet internal conflict led to their decline. Originally and more accurately called the Sweet Shop, these unabashed early glam rockers boasted a hit catalog, including the chart-topping 1973 single Blockbuster and Bright Leather Pants. Sweet, a 70s British rock band that was part of the glam movement, got its start in 1965 with the band Wainwright's Gentlemen. Among its members were Mick Tucker and Ian Gillan, later to join Deep Purple. Gillan left the band and was eventually replaced by vocalist Brian Connolly. In January of 1968, Connolly and Tucker left the band and formed their own, calling it The Sweet Shop. Bass player Steve Priest joined them, as did guitarist Frank Torpey. The band developed somewhat of a following on the pub circuit and was soon signed to a contract by Fontana Records. Since there was already an existing band called The Sweet Shop, the band changed its name to The Sweet. They recorded a single, Slow Motion, but it went nowhere. Fontana dropped them and Torpey left the band. They kept playing for the next few years, building a following and going through several personnel and management changes and doing some recording, but they remained hitless. In 1971, they finally had a hit with Funny Funny. Tensions had been building with their songwriting management team, and the band was unhappy with the bubblegum image they were being cast in and their reputation as just a lightweight pop band. Number 5. Sha Na Na. How does a doo-wop revival band go from Woodstock to TV stardom only to fade into nostalgia? Sha Na Na's wild ride brought them from rock history to pop culture. Most groups would call playing Woodstock and appearing in the 70s biggest musical film Grease a successful career. But that was just the beginning for this New York-based throwback act whose hit TV series of the same name ran 4 seasons and proved in 1981 the world still needed doo-wop. Billing themselves as from the streets of New York, members were frequently outfitted in gold lame or leather jackets and sported pompadour or ducktail hairdos. The group's name was taken from a series of nonsense syllables, Sha Na Na Na, Sha Na 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 Na, in the song Get a Job, originally recorded by the Silhouettes. Sha Na Na released their last regular album in 2006, although they subsequently released compilation albums. As of December 5th, 2022, they announced that they would no longer tour. Number 4. Derek and the Dominos. What happens when a supergroup's potential is derailed by personal demons? Derek and the Dominos gave us Layla, but their story ended too soon. Derek and the Dominos came about through its 4 members' involvement in the American soul revue Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. The group was anchored by the musical duo Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett, with a rotating ensemble of supporting members. Delaney and Bonnie and Friends supported Blind Faith, Eric Clapton's short-lived supergroup with Stevie Winwood on a U.S. tour in the summer of 1969. While on that tour, Clapton was drawn to Delaney and Bonnie's relative anonymity, which he found more appealing than the excessive fan worship lavished on his own band. Derek and the Dominos, created by Eric Clapton, were short-lived but left behind the timeless hit Layla. After just 1 album, personal tragedies and Clapton's battles with addiction led to the band's dissolution. Their brief period of activity ended with a legacy that continues to resonate with blues and rock enthusiasts. Number 3. The Jam. What happens when a band breaks up at the peak of their powers? The Jam was one of Britain's most influential punk bands, but their story ended abruptly. The Jam were at the forefront of the punk rock movement in Britain, blending rock, R&B, and punk into a distinctive sound. Led by Paul Weller, the band split at the height of their popularity in 1982, leaving fans desiring more of their sharply crafted songs and energetic performances. Formed in 1973 in Woking near London, the Jam gained popularity in the English club circuit. Their energetic shows and sound drew comparisons with the early Who, and that band's influence is evident in the Jam's first album, In the City, 1977, which solidified the group's guitar-bass-drums lineup. Later records, particularly All Mod Cons, 1978, and Setting Suns, 1979, reflected more influences, which eventually included those of the Kinks, the Beatles, Motown, and soul. Those albums also showcased the band's growing social awareness, with politically charged songs such as Down in the Tube Station at Midnight about xenophobic violence and Eaton Rifles, steeped in class conflict. Always a peculiar English band in both their outlook and their lyrics, the Jam never gained international popularity to match their success in the United Kingdom, where they were huge stars and where songwriter and driving force Weller was, for a time, regarded as a spokesman for his generation. The Jam broke up in 1982 as Weller went on to form the Style Council and later embarked on a solo career. Number 2. The Modern Lovers. What happens when a band's raw honesty sets the stage for punk rock but ends before they hit the big time? The Modern Lovers' impact outlasted their short-lived existence. The Modern Lovers, led by Jonathan Richman, were pivotal in the development of punk rock with their minimalist style and forthright lyrics. It featured Richman and bassist Ernie Brooks with drummer David Robinson, later of The Cars, and keyboardist Jerry Harrison, later of Talking Heads. They disbanded before their debut album was officially released, which later became a cult classic. The band's breakup deprived the punk scene of a uniquely introspective voice. The sound of the band owed a great deal to the influence of the Velvet Underground and the Stooges, and is now sometimes classified as proto-punk. It pointed the way towards much of the punk rock, new wave, alternative, and indie rock music of later decades. Their only album, the eponymous The Modern Lovers, contained idiosyncratic songs about dating awkwardness, growing up in Massachusetts, love of life, and the USA. Later, between 1976 and 1988, Richman used the name Modern Lovers for a variety of backing bands, always billed as Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. These bands were quieter and featured more low-key, often near childlike songs, as Richman drew on folk rock and other genres. Of Richman's original bandmates, only Robinson was part of any other Modern Lovers incarnations. Number 1. Sex Pistols. What happens when a band ignites a cultural revolution but burns out just as quickly? The Sex Pistols' chaotic rise and fall are the stuff of legend. The Sex Pistols burst onto the music scene with a raw energy that epitomized the punk rock movement of the late 70s. The song God Save the Queen became a symbol of the United Kingdom's social and political turmoil. The original members were vocalist Johnny Rotten, guitarist Steve Jones, drummer Paul Cook, and bassist Glenn Matlock. A later member was bassist Sid Vicious. Despite their profound impact on the genre, they disbanded after just one album, Nevermind the Bullocks, Here's the Sex Pistols. Their breakup left fans yearning for more of their rebellious anthems and anti-establishment ethos. Thrown together in September 1975 by manager Malcolm McLaren to promote Sex, his London clothing store, the Sex Pistols began mixing 1960s English pop music influences, the Small Faces, the Who, with those of 1970s rock renegades, Iggy and the Stooges, and the New York Dolls, in an attempt to strip rock's complexities to the bone. By the summer of 1976, the Sex Pistols had attracted an avid fan base and successfully updated the energies of the 1960s mods for the malignant teenage mood of the 70s. Heavily stylized in their image and music, Media savvy and ambitious in their use of lyrics, the Sex Pistols became the leaders of a new teenage movement called punk by the British press in the autumn of 1976. Their first single, Anarchy in the UK, was both a call to arms and a State of the Nation address. When they used profanity on live television in December 1976, the group became a national sensation. Scandalized in the tabloid press, the Sex Pistols were dropped by their first record company, EMI, in January 1977. Their next contract with A&M Records was severed after only a few days in March. A short, disastrous U.S. tour precipitated the group's split in January 1978, following their biggest show to date in San Francisco. Attempting to keep the Sex Pistols going with the film project that became The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, 1980, McLaren issued records with an increasingly uncontrollable Vicious as the vocalist. A cover version of Eddie Cochran's Come On Everybody became the group's best-selling single, following Vicious's fatal heroin overdose in New York City in February 1979 while out on bail, charged with the murder of his girlfriend Nancy Spungen. That same month, McLaren was sued by Rotten, and the Sex Pistols disappeared into receivership, only to be revived some years after the 1986 court case that restored control of their affairs to the group. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this nostalgic ride, smash that like button and subscribe for more music history content. Don't stop here. Check out our other videos for more deep dives into the golden age of rock. Keep the music alive.